My name is Anne McElhinney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
Welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. It is week 45 of which means that is 11 and a quarter months of the 2-week flatten the curve lockdown. And we are back from the free and the brave and the sunny state of Florida, where life goes on almost normally and everyone is moving. And we'll talk about that a bit later. And we're going to also talk to Ezra Levant.
Yes, the Canadian journalist. We're going to talk to him about ethical oil and how Joe Biden's cancelling of the Keystone Pipeline emboldens and enriches America's enemies.
Okay, and BLM have been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And we ask what the is going on. We're old enough to remember actually when the Nobel Peace Prize was given out to people that were worthy of it, and that wasn't a total joke. But anyway, we'll move on to that. And in the latest news on the Chinese virus, the EU has been shown to be hypocritical liars, but then you already knew that, right?
And as Republicans give speeches, the left do their thing, and they team up with Planned Parenthood to show the artistic beauty of abortion.
And this week is a very sad anniversary of the death of our dear friend Orson Bean. And we have a way that you can join online in a memorial that'll be happening on Zoom next Saturday. He actually died on the 7th of February, our dear, dear friend. And Liberals try to destroy the livelihoods of anyone in DC for the January 6th protests. We look at one man's story of what happened to his business. And we think you might like to support his business, his really gorgeous online business.
And some news about the artist formerly known as Hunter Biden.
You see the way I did that, Phelim? I said the artist formerly known. You see that instead of formerly? Formerly known. Do you think that's funny? No, maybe not.
Isn't he formerly known as the first son?
Okay, the artist formerly known as Hunter Biden, and we have a recipe. We had some criticism, which we'll bring up later on, about the fact that there wasn't a recipe last week. And by the way, we have a game-changing recipe for you for the week of the Super Bowl. So I'm feeling kind of good about that.
Given the fact, what? Game-changing?
Game-changing mac and cheese. And for Irish people, by the way, to be giving mac and cheese recipes to the Americans, I think there's something gorgeous about that. But it's an elevated mac and cheese, and it's a totally new concept on mac and cheese, different from what you're used to, and you're going to love it forever. So, Florida, Phelim. So we went to Florida, and by the way, so if you look like on the New York Times, there's an article this week about the fact that everyone's moving to Miami. So we were in Miami and in, where else? Boca Raton for meeting people, secret mission.
And then we went down to sort of North Miami.
North Miami. I don't know, was it North Miami? We went to
Miami.
We went to a place called South Beach.
Yeah, we were down by Miami. By the way, this article in the New York Times, it combines the two things the New York Times love. Actually, the one thing. New York Times, for all its equality, for all its, we need to, rich people are evil. They are obsessed with rich people, and not in the sense rich people are evil. They're covetous. And it made us realize actually why coveting is a sin, because it's really made it clear they're covetous, not in a good way. So they're obsessed and jealous and envious and that's what covetous is, I think. Yes.
You mixed all together, and I can see why the Jews put it as a sin way back in the day. Very smart.
Talking of which, remember that guy we met? We won't say his name.
Very nice person. I was thinking of him.
Very intelligent person, and he just out of nowhere started talking about, how Judeo-Christian rules changed the world.
Yes.
Up until then, you had
polytheism, and everyone had their own god.
And your gods could, whatever you wanted to do, you could find a god to justify it. Then there were these people called the Jews, who came along and said, nope, there are set rules for living. And there are 10 of them, not like 12 like Jordan Peters, but 10 of them. And, and if you don't do this, you won't go to heaven, and you will be wrong, right and wrong. And he points out that that's the root of anti-Semitism. It's people who tell you you're wrong, you could really, and if you know you're wrong deep in your soul, that's what makes you really, really, really angry. So it's not often you meet someone and they tell you something that makes you think about things in a different way.
But we did. We met some very nice people. But anyway, so the New York Times article is very good. Like the headline is, "Join us in Miami, love Masters of the Universe." American business leaders freed from the office looked around the country, taking note of the coronavirus lockdowns, taxes, and rabble-rousers. And many said, as if in unison, Miami. Blackstone Group, Miami. Elliott Management, Miami. Silicon Valley venture capitalists, Miami. And the charming mayor, Francis Suarez, a registered Republican, knowing he had an especially easy sell at the moment, said, welcome. As tech leaders have decamped from San Francisco and Wall Street titans from New York, many have spread across the country to locate with sun, lower taxes, and preferably more relaxed lockdowns. So basically he says, and it's just a quote from him, it's a great article, by the way, I highly recommend it. From the mayor. He said it was a lightning in a bottle moment, says Mr. Suarez, 43, who became the mayor in 2017, for them to hear an elected official say, hey, we want you, hey, we appreciate you. I didn't realise what a sensitive moment it was in terms of how people felt they were being treated by the governments where they lived. And there's a great quote in this article actually by a guy we know called David Blumberg, a venture capitalist, who says, we recognise the amazing and unique natural gifts that God and geology bestowed on California, but enough is enough, wrote this guy, David Blumberg, who moved from San Francisco to Miami in November. We certainly hope and pray that California will take action to remedy the disastrous, self-inflicted political situation and restore its former luster and quality of life. But for now, we are voting with our feet to Miami.
Yeah.
So what did we think, Phelim? Did we like Florida?
I mean, we were busy. We were in a lot of meetings. I'm not sure we got the full Florida experience. I'm not sold as yet.
Phelim's not ready to give up on California just yet. But I have to say, the seaside, the ocean, we were on the east side. So we were Palm Springs, Boca Raton, Miami. Yeah. Really gorgeous and beautiful ocean and all of that.
A proper ocean, not like the puddle we have out here. Not like Pacific Ocean puddle.
But very, very interesting, by the way, that we met loads of New Yorkers, by the way, right? New Yorkers.
So basically, people are buying houses, and especially condos, sight unseen from New York. They're basically going online and it's going check, check, check. It has a view of the ocean, check, HOAs, check, and they're just buying it. And it's actually difficult to get somewhere to live there. So, I mean, obviously... But
we had a very interesting observation we heard that I thought was really good of a description of Miami. And I'd love people who know Miami better than us because we were really in and out and we're working a lot, so we didn't really get to look around as much. But one person observed about Miami, I thought it was a great observation, was if you look at Miami from a distance, if you're driving up to it and you don't know anything, it looks like New York. So it's got all these high-rises, high-rise, which is kind of exciting, except for it has all those high-rises without the stuff underneath. Right? So in New York, when you look at New York, it's got the high-rises. Underneath there's a deli, and there's a laundry, and there's a little locksmith, then there's another little bistro, and then there's another, an Apple store, and there's all this. So in Miami, there's those high-rises, and it's not a walking thing either. So Miami is not a walking neighborhood. To me, It seemed like it wasn't a walking thing. You can all write and tell me I've got it wrong. But we need to go on to
I felt also, I just got the slight criminality vibe from Miami,
That's because Phelim was brought up on a diet of Miami Vice, where obviously you got the impression that there was awful crime going on the whole time.
I have to say, I never once watched Miami Vice.
Oh my God, we watched it religiously in our house.
Yeah,
it was so glamorous, and it was such a lovely antidote to the rain in Ireland. The grey and the dark evenings, and then you'd watch Miami Vice, and the sun never stopped shining. And they were always in a boat. They never seemed to get in a car at all. They always jumped into a boat and sped off to find the bad fella. Brilliant. I loved it.
Bad fella should have just driven around. No one would ever caught
No, the bad fella very often was in a boat, by the way. Yeah. And he would have a blingy kind of watch and a blingy kind of girlfriend. It was fantastic. We're moving on to our interview. We spoke earlier to Ezra Levant, the great Ezra Levant.
Yeah.
About
everything.
About everything. But by the way, before we begin that interview, I do think it's worth... Can we just watch this fabulous moment of Ezra being questioned by the government of Canada, by their Human Rights Commission, asking him
why?
What was he thinking? What was he thinking? What was his intent when he decided to publish the Muhammad cartoons? What was his intent? It's really a beautiful thing. About 250,000 people have watched this piece.
By the way, this is coming to a state near you with hate laws and human rights violations.
Thought crimes.
Yeah, well, free speech can now be a crime.
But Ezra, it's a tour de force. I think this is a great way to introduce Ezra. Have a watch this.
And I always in an investigation interview, I always ask people, even though they've been as thorough as you have, in summary fashion, what was your intent and purpose of your article with the cartoon illustrations published on February 27, 2006?
Why is that a relevant question?
Under section 3.1a, it talks about intention, purpose. We like to get some background as well.
We published what we published. The words in the picture speak for themselves. My answer to your question is as follows. We published those cartoons for the intention and purpose of exercising our inalienable rights as free-born Albertans to publish whatever the hell we want, no matter what the hell we think.
So we're joined now by Canadian journalist and thinker Ezra Levant. Ezra is a free speech warrior, a journalist, an author. He's the author of Ethical Oil, which is a great book about the madness of banning North American oil whilst welcoming Russian oil or Saudi Arabian oil and the ethical dilemmas that creates. And I just realized I said at the beginning he's a free speech warrior and a journalist. I'm old enough to remember when that was an automatic all journalists were free speech warriors. Now that is not the way. A lot of journalism nowadays seems to be exposing other journalistic outlets and trying to get them cancelled and trying to get them banned. So please welcome Ezra Levant. Thanks for coming on the show, Ezra.
Well, my pleasure. I'm a big fan of you guys. It was you two who taught me about the power of crowdfunding independent journalism. I learned so much from you. And actually, I learned a lot about fracking from you. Your movie, Frack Nation, inspired me to study that technology, and it has truly transformed America. So this is a thrill for me to talk with you, because so many ways you've been a role model for me.
And by the way, I wanted to just mention that before you came on there, Ezra, we actually showed our audience the really beautiful, magnificent exchange you had with the government of the Canadian government Human Rights Commission lady, who was asking you about your intent, what you were thinking, what evil thoughts you had. And I thought it's a tour de force, and we'll be giving people the link to that. It's a brilliant exchange, a chilling exchange. When was that, by the way? When did that happen?
That was in 2008. Oh, and back then I should say that almost every journalist in Canada, even those who disagree with me personally or politically, was on my side. But now, a dozen years later, I must tell you that it's got to be 90% flipped. And whereas back then people stood with my right, and there were others who said we should all publish those cartoons, now it would be calls of Islamophobia, hate speech. There would be a cancel culture struggle session. So it has gone terrible in the course of a dozen years.
Yeah.
And the Human Rights Commission that went after me back then has let me be, because they got such a bruising then. But censorship has moved in many ways out of the government and into, as you point out, woke journalists who are actually doing anti-journalism. And most terrifying of all, the social media companies. At least I had a public hearing, an interrogation. I could read the charge against me. I could know who the complainant was. All that's gone when Facebook, YouTube, Twitter just push a button. You don't even know who complained. There was no hearing. There's no appeal. And it's all done in secret. At least the Star Chamber had a chamber. At least you had a lawyer. We are in dark days in free speech.
Exactly, and journalists are leading the charge. So the reason we wanted you on initially, anyway, was to talk about the Keystone Pipeline. And a lot of people have seen that Joe Biden has cancelled it. Can you explain? I suppose a lot of people know about the Keystone Pipeline, but they don't realize that it takes oil from Canada. Can you explain what kind of oil it takes and why this is such a bad idea?
Well, the Alberta oil sands, which are sometimes called the tar sands, which is a little inaccurate because there's no tar in them, but it sounds dirtier that way.
Yeah.
The oil sands are really a fairly new technology. until about 20 years ago, they were regarded as experimental, sort of like a kooky scheme. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's oil that's mixed with the sand. You can see it, and it naturally gurgles up in the river. Early indigenous peoples used it to waterproof their canoes. So it's been there for millions of years. And through decades of tinkering, science has found a way to economically basically steam or wash the oil off the sand. So they're actually cleaning a million-year-old oil spill. When they're done, the output is oil and clean sand. So some people joke it's the world's largest oil spill recovery project, but that oil, now that oil is producible, it is as large or even larger than Saudi oil reserves. In fact, the size of the reserves in the oil sand, and it wasn't until about 20 years ago that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, allowed oil companies to even say that was real. It was so experimental. And then suddenly technology and freedom combined to present this resource that everyone knew was there, but only recently became commercially viable. So that really altered the landscape, because when the oil sands became commercially productive, OPEC was so dominant, and the United States was the world's largest importer of energy. So every barrel of oil that Americans bought, mainly for driving around, that was 50 or $100 that went into the pockets of a Saudi sheikh or a Russian oligarch or a Venezuelan dictator. I mean, I like to joke that when God was handing out oil, he gave it to all the world's bastards. I mean, think about the nasty places, Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Venezuela, like not Russia. These are not the nicest places to be from. They treat their people very poorly. But the United States is a large producer of oil, but it doesn't have huge reserves. But suddenly Canada became this huge producer, and it has more than half of all the world's publicly accessible oil. What I mean by that is you can't just go to Saudi Arabia and drill, because it's owned by the king. You can't just go to Venezuela and drill. It's owned by the tyrant Maduro. So if you're an oil company, actually half of the world's freely accessible oil is in Canada. And I wrote a book called Ethical Oil, and I said, if you're looking to buy oil, it's a very fungible commodity. If you don't buy it from this guy, you'll buy it from that guy. There's some differences in how sulfurous the oil is or how heavy it is, but that can all be fixed in refining. It really is such an interchangeable commodity. So I said, if you have to choose where you're buying oil from, and until we develop a magical fantasy fuel of the future that's perfect in every way, like unobtainium, it was called in that film. Look, I mean, I got to fill up my car probably sometime this week, so I can't wait for that miracle fuel. It's going to be filled up with gas made from oil from somewhere. So you're either buying what I call ethical oil from Canada, the United States, I guess the UK, North Sea, and I've almost run out of countries that are ethical oil, or what I call conflict oil from OPEC regimes. Just like blood diamonds, there's conflict oil.
So basically the Keystone Pipeline was the way of getting this ethical oil from Canada to the American market. And to explain what effect, I mean, is that going to stop the oil, or is it going to come by train? Is it going to make it less attractive, more attractive?
So the Keystone XL pipeline would just bring that Canadian ethical oil down. The pipeline starts in Alberta, where the oil sands are. It comes diagonally, picks up ethical oil from North Dakota, the Bakken geological formation that's fracked oil, and then takes it down to the refineries in Texas that used to take these huge ships from Venezuela. So it was built deliberately to replace foreign conflict oil with North American ethical oil. And that's what the Keystone XL pipeline was made for, to displace the bad stuff and bring in the good stuff, keep the money in North America, stop supporting tyrants. It was a beautiful idea. Yep. Now, fracking and Trump opening up drilling in the Gulf of Mexico and Alaska has made America, has closed that gap. But still, this pipeline would bring the good stuff to America and push out more of the bad stuff. Now, some of it will come down south by train, these 2-3 mile long trains of oil. And trains are a fairly safe way of transporting things, but they're not as safe as an underground pipeline. God forbid a train derails. I mean, you could turn off a pipeline rather quickly. It doesn't compete for other things like, that would be on the same train tracks. It's just safer and cheaper. And if you care about those sorts of things, it has less emissions, a pipeline, than a train.
Sure.
Now, one of the reasons that some people speculate for opposition to the Keystone XL pipelines is if you are Warren Buffett and you have an enormous stake in BNSF Railway, that they ship a lot of oil by rail, you don't want this pipeline because it's a competitor to you. If you're Venezuela, you don't want this pipeline because it's a competitor to you. So it's always a good idea when you're trying to scratch your head and saying, why would they shut down this pipeline? To ask the Latin phrase, cui bono, who benefits?
Well, as Hillary Clinton said behind closed doors to bankers, but never said publicly during her campaign, she had evidence that the anti-fracking movement in America was funded by Russia. Now, she said that in speeches, but she never said it on the campaign. I know we're all being accused of being conspiracy theories here. Nowadays, it's very fashionable to say that. But look, if the Russians weren't funding the anti-fracking movement and the anti-oil sands movement, they'd be crazy. Yeah. It's what they should be doing as a hostile power, because 80% of their budget is dependent upon their oil and gas industry. They need to take out the competitors.
Can I ask a question? Ezra, how far along had the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline, how far along had they gotten when this happened, when this Joe Biden initiative happened? Because it already had started construction, am I right?
Yeah, and in fact, it was last spring, so almost a year ago, that the portion across the border was finished. So you can see on the company TC Pipeline's website a beautiful video, actually. I thought it was quite touching, of crossing the border, the world's longest undefended border. The pipeline is not huge. It's only 36 inches or 3 feet wide. It's not that big. If you look at a map of all the pipelines in the United States, it looks like a spider's web. So this is just one more pipeline. It's not the biggest pipeline in America. It would be the newest and the most high-tech.
And the safest. And I'm sure the safest, yeah.
And the alternative is bringing in conflict oil by tanker ship. And again, I'm not going to say those aren't safe. It's all pretty safe.
And you mentioned a thing there. I think one of the big problems we noticed when we were doing the fracking film as well was people get in the shower, they have the nice warm shower. People really don't know where any of the energy comes from. They have the electric cars here in California. They don't know that electric car is actually fueled by coal. And equally, what you just mentioned there, which I think is super important in relation to the XL pipeline, is the fact that under our feet, if people only knew the huge, massive network of pipelines that are already existing here, many of them extremely old, and that this XL Keystone Pipeline would be the newest, the safest, the most up-to-date with all the new technology. And that's the one that they're going to make a big fuss about. And, in this kind of, in a virtue signaling move by the Biden administration to cancel it. It's horrible.
Well, pipelines are ancient. I mean, think of the Roman aqueducts. They are a very normal thing. It's very hard to demonize pipelines, but you throw $1 billion worth of propaganda at it, people get scared. I should tell you, and I don't want to alarm you, your house probably has 2 pipelines to it. One carries toxic material away. It's called your sewer pipe. The other is dangerous. It carries an explosive substance called natural gas. So we have pipelines every day. We live with them. They've been around since before Roman times. Pipelines are the safest thing there is, but they've been fetishized by the left. I want to say one last thing, and it's an idea I want to throw at you that might get the noggin jogging. Everything we wear, everything we buy in a store has what's called country of origin labeling on it. my suit I'm wearing, my jacket, my iPhone. And a lot of times these days we see made in China, which maybe we don't like so much. But why is it that oil, which is made into gasoline that we put in our cars, why is there no country of origin labeling on the gas pumps? Because that is something that in many cases would be easy to track. Was the oil made in America? Was it made in a liberal democracy like Canada? Or as we mentioned before, the North Sea oil, that's ethical oil, the Brits and others. Mm-hmm. If there was a little country of origin label on a gas pump, and let's say across the street was an American or a Canadian ethical oil, certified ethical oil, like you have certified organic or but it would be certified, someone would check, oh yes, I went to the refinery and the feedstock is from Texas and Oklahoma and Canada. So we're going to give it an ethical oil stamp. And then across the street was oil from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or Sudan or some terrible place like that. Then the consumer would have information. And some people would say, oh, I don't care, I just want the cheapest. Okay. Others would say, you know what, I'll drive an extra 2 blocks to get the good stuff. I might even pay an extra 5 cents a gallon for the good stuff because I don't want to support the bad behavior of dictators. I have in my book 4 measurements by which Canadian and American oil is morally superior than conflict oil. Number 1, environmental protection. That's not a thing in the third world.
Yeah.
Number 2, peace. We don't use oil to, fund terrorism, which is what they do in Iran or places like that. And number 3, what the left might call economic justice. Is all the money going to the oligarch at the top? Or in the case of America and Canada, are ordinary men and women who work in the oil fields making high 5-figure, 6-figure salaries? I mean, as you know, and you guys know, I learned this from you, some of the best jobs in America are in oil and gas. And finally, something we take for granted in Canada, America, the UK, human rights. We don't stone gays. We allow women to work. I mean, what's the gender analysis on Saudi oil? There are no women allowed to work in Saudi Arabia. So if you care about the environment, peace, economic justice for workers, or human rights, the way Maduro treats Aboriginal people in Venezuela, for example, if you care about that, and the reason I chose those 4 indicia, because those are what liberals talk about. I'm a right-wing guy, so I talk about money and security and things like that. But if you're a liberal, you claim you care about the environment, peace, economic justice, and human rights. But why on earth then would you buy oil from Putin or from a tyranny or a terrorist fascist theocracy that stones women accused of adultery? So there's a real moral reason.
I love that idea so much, and I think you make a really good point. Yeah, exactly. You buy a t-shirt and you get the exact provenance of where it's come from and all of that. What a great idea. And by the way, I when we were doing Frack Nation, it occurred to me that, that oil that's there in the oil sands, the oil that's here in the shale is oil, OIL, organic, indigenous, and local, which, as you say, lefties really normally get really excited about. This is organic material. It is indigenous to this area. People lit their water for years. They called towns burning springs, and it's local. It's local in Pennsylvania, in New York, all over the place. It's everywhere. And we're always saying, when I give speeches about this, I'm always saying to people, if you go home and you can light your water on fire out of your faucet, please get in touch with me. I'm very interested in buying your house, sight unseen, for those mineral rights.
As long as you have the mineral rights.
As long as you have the mineral rights.
To use another phrase of the left, they're very concerned about coffee. I believe that Canadian ethical oil and American ethical oil are the fair trade coffee of the world's oil industry. And if you would pay an extra $1 for a cup of coffee that's fair trade, you don't even have to pay more for ethical oil. You just have to stop banning it. The Keystone XL is not bringing in expensive coffee that costs twice as much as the other coffee.
In your opinion, then, what's the motivation for banning the Keystone XL pipeline?
Well, I think that it's become a symbol where Joe Biden shows his green credentials. That pipeline has become so anathematized. It is the devil. It's the scapegoat. Throw rocks at it. By the way, it's largely being built by unions, including Labor's International Union, LIUNA, and other unions. You know, if you're in the steel business, and the steel business is highly unionized. If you're in the construction, all those jobs, those are working class jobs. And I find it very disturbing that the party of the left, which calls itself for the working man, would shut down working class jobs, quality jobs. Some of those jobs pay $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And to ship those jobs to Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Kuwait, Qatar, what are you doing?
I think it proves, and I've been saying this, that the union leadership do not care about the union membership. I mean, and we saw that during the 2016 election. The union members voted for Trump. The union leaders recommended voting for Hillary. The union leaders, they're not leaders of workers. They're political activists, and they could move on to the next political activist job. They could lead a PAC, a super PAC. They could lead an environmental organization. They could, you know, that's the level they're at. They're not really at the level of caring for the workers. And I think these kind of dilemmas. I mean, they may condemn Biden closing it down, but they're not out protesting. They're not withdrawing their funds. They're not recommending voting for Democrats. So, you know, I think people are learning a lot about the leadership of these unions. But Trudeau, your prime minister, is against this, is he? Tell me where he fits.
How is he managing this situation?
Well, there were a number of pipelines because, like I said, this oil sands came online quite suddenly, only about 20 years ago. And so Canadian production ramped up. There were little pipelines, but then there were these major pipeline projects. One was going to go to the west coast of British Columbia, and it would sell to Asia. Another would go all the way to New Brunswick on the east coast. And believe it or not, that is closer to India. There were all these pipeline projects that would go to ocean water, and then there was the Keystone XL to America. But one after the other, Justin Trudeau canceled the ones that went to blue water. And then he claimed he was passively supportive of the Keystone XL. In his mind, he thought Hillary Clinton would have won in 2016. So it would be his way of saying, oh, I totally supported that one. What a shame that Hillary Clinton nixed it. So he was rather shocked when Trump won and approved the pipeline. But alas, 4 years have gone by, the pipeline was not completed. And so when Biden nixed it, really in his first day in office, Trudeau didn't put up a fight. He said, oh, shucks, what are you going to do? So he is anti-oil. He's an anti-oil extremist. Mm-hmm. In Canada, there's a rivalry between central Canada and Western Canada. Trudeau has always been antipathetic to Western Canada. So he likes this, and he wants to be very woke. Mm-hmm. And he wants to be the toast of the town at the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. So he wants to be he wants to be best friends with Jacinda Ardern and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
God help him.
God help him, that's right.
Yes, what an ambition. So we're coming towards the end of the interview. We sent you a few questions there. We ask all our guests, first of all, for their go-to recipe.
What are you famous for in your house for cooking there, Ezra?
Well, you know what? I am limited in my repertoire. I'm in charge of the barbecue grill.
Okay.
And, so it's pretty simple. I just try not to burn the steaks. And I know that's not a very fancy answer, but that really is, the barbecue's my domain. And I have no fancy recipe.
We need to ask, we're the people, we ask the question, get the answer, whatever. So the next question, the work of art, which is that moved you, that was inspiring to you.
Well, in the before times, before the travel bans and before the pandemic, I went with my family to Italy, and we stopped and gazed at Michelangelo's David, the sculpture. And it's endlessly interesting. And then there's a lot of plaques and descriptions. And I think it's the one right near the statue that says it's perhaps the finest sculpture in existence and the only one you need to study for the perfection of the craft. And it is true. You can't stop looking at every detail in that. And it's a marvel that such a thing was carved from a block. And listen, if you're talking about Italy, you can't not mention the Sistine Chapel and the artwork in the Vatican. But just for one particular piece, listen, the roof of the Sistine Chapel, that's many pieces. But I would have to say, the Statue of David.
That's very good. All right, well, very, very nice to have that. That's a really good one, and we'll
way
be
to
putting
end.
very good way to end, and we'll
The
be having
interview.
people have a look at that. They're probably going to, they'll probably cancel that because is David white, by the way? Because that's something that's just concerning me now. Actually, are you actually promoting a perfect piece of art that's celebrating a white man? Is that what you're doing right now, Ezra? I just want to check.
Well, I mean, I can't remember offhand. I think it was gray. So I don't. I'd have to. You know what? Without checking, now you've got me. I can't remember the color of the. Of the.
I think it's fairly alabaster. But anyway, we're so grateful for your time, Ezra, and always great to see you. And I hope we all get free soon and we can all meet up again. The border at the moment is closed between us. Canada's border is closed.
Right.
How bizarre is that? But we look forward to freedom and meeting up again soon, Ezra.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
That was wonderful. Great. Ezra's always funny and always interesting. So
We'll definitely have him on again.
we'll definitely have him on again.
Yeah,
So
he's
what else is
great.
on the show today, huh?
Well, we have to mention that Black Lives Matter, BLM, have been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And we're
Are you
old
sure
enough...
it's a peace prize, not a prize for fiction?
No.
No.
Oh.
Well, most of their stories are fictionalized.
Can I just say the Babylon Bee had the best headline on this. Babylon Bee said, BLM get nominated for the mostly peaceful Nobel Peace Prize. Mostly
Yes.
peaceful. Did you like that?
Yes.
I love that. Let's have a quick look at BLM's behaviour this past summer.
Oh my God! They just bombed the f***ing police! Yeah! Let's go, baby! Let's go, baby! Oh shit! Oh shit!
So you can see quite easily why they would get nominated for a Peace Prize, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're old enough to remember, by the way, when the Peace Prize kind of meant something. And it's kind of good to look back, actually, at when... And I don't know when exactly it lost its way and became
I would
a
say,
lunatic organisation.
I wonder. I mean, I
If what?
wonder.
You wonder what?
if it ever had its way.
Well, can I just say I really appreciated the 1970 prize that they gave to Norman Borlaug, who was responsible for the Green Revolution. And at the time, they said, for having given a well-founded hope, the Green Revolution.
And that
and
was-
do you know what the Green Revolution was? Nothing that AOC has ever talked about. The Green Revolution was
Genetically modifying plants and crops to make them
resistant to disease,
And
so that
drought.
people would not starve to death.
And also, they did award the Peace Prize in 1973 to Henry Kissinger and Lee Duc Tho for having jointly negotiated the ceasefire in Vietnam. Now, that's Henry Kissinger, who ended the Democratic-started war
Would that
in
be Henry
Vietnam.
Kissinger, the Republican?
Yes, who ended the war that the Democrats started. But I think, I would suggest, and now, well, I'll put it Aung San Suu Kyi.
Aung San Suu Kyi, who won it in 1991 for her non-violent struggle for democracy
And then
human rights.
everyone loved her for that.
For a minute.
And then she was even awarded the freedom of the city of Dublin. And then she had a
No higher honour could a person get. Go on ahead there.
Then she had a Muslim insurgency with the Rohingya, and she crushed that, and her generals crushed that rather
Effectively.
and then
No one likes her now.
Dublin City Council voted to withdraw the freedom of the city.
I'd say she loses an awful lot of sleep over that.
I would think so.
Yes, but also, by the way, I don't know when the rot began, but can I just say it certainly wasn't helped by the 2007 awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and Albert Arnold Gore for their efforts to build up and disseminate greater knowledge about man-made climate change and to lay the foundation for measures that are needed to counteract such change.
Yes,
I'll tell you one thing that prize didn't give them a prize for was allowing anyone who disagreed with them to say anything.
Yes, it didn't. Well, it's not a prize for dissent or for persuasion, actually. For their efforts to build up and disseminate. Well, one way of disseminating greater knowledge would be to actually take on your critics
Yes.
and have debates with them and answer
Open.
their questions, but rather than calling them deniers.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. And obviously, I think the lowest point possibly was the Nobel Peace Prize that was won in 2009 by Barack Hussein Obama for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. I have a question for you, Philip. Did Barack Hussein Obama get a Nobel Peace? Do you think that they didn't know, by the way, that he was sending in, like, that he was doing those, what was it, those drone killings, was it? That
Well,
he was
at that stage, actually, he wasn't. I mean, the real joke about it was he'd been in office
for a minute.
For a minute, like literally a month or two. So he actually hadn't done anything. But he did go on to do an enormous amount of drone killing, and for the first time, actually, authorized the killing of an American citizen abroad. Without due process.
There you go. There's the Nobel Prize for you, you see. So in the most recent times, it's obviously lost its reason, and it's particularly lost its reason with this BLM choice. In virus news, Phelim. So we always want to, we gave up the daily virus, and I know a lot of you missed that, and we have seen your messages, and we hear you, and we love you, and we do really love you, actually, and we love the messages. So keep on with the messages. Tell us what's happening.
The comments and messages.
Love them.
Yes, so the European Union, you know, that cuddly group of people,
so loving,
so dedicated
and kind,
to peace and
civility,
love, and then you got
compassion.
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 The evil British who are just
evil.
Evil. That's it. So anyway, the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, who is you know, the bigwig in the European Union, unelected. She's had a rough few days. So AstraZeneca were contracted by the European Union to get their vaccines. And AstraZeneca, but the British government decided, you know, all this bureaucracy, we'll just authorise AstraZeneca's vaccine without the usual red tape. The European Union waited months because that's the European Union. So Britain was ahead. Britain signed a contract with AstraZeneca saying, give us like 75 million vaccines. The European Union signed a contract, give us all your vaccines, give us vaccines also. The AstraZeneca announced that in their Brussels plant there had been a production problem and they wouldn't be able to fulfill the European Union contract. The European Union responded by, and I use this word carefully and directly, lying about the contract. Ursula von der Leyen said, oh, you are obliged. They said, we're not actually. If you look at the contract, there's an actual clause in it that says we'll make best efforts but nothing else. And she says that she actually told the European Union, 400 million people, that clause does not exist. They accidentally then released the contract where the clause was. But to put pressure on AstraZeneca, they sent the cops, armed police, into their Brussels factory.
This is just to remember, this is the EU, the kind and cuddly and compassionate EU. Nice one. Unelected EU executive.
So then switched to my part of the world, Northern Ireland. When Britain was leaving, they foolishly, and it actually was
leaving the EU.
Yeah, leaving the EU. Theresa May, that weak-willed bureaucrat who ended up as a prime minister, agreed to some weird agreement where Northern Ireland would be treated differently from the rest of the United Kingdom in a border sense, and it would have
that's
this
the backstop. Was it called that?
Then it transformed into this kind of zone where there'd be free trade. But there was a clause in the agreement that both sides could stop this. I think it was Article 16 and invoke it and close the border. And everyone thought this was going to be the evil British doing this all the time. Who was the first one to do it 1 month after the agreement was agreed? It was Brussels. And what was it about? Not cows, not cats, not dogs.
Not microchips. No.
It was vaccines.
Vaccines.
They stopped the vaccines.
Vital vaccines that would save lives. This is what they invoked.
They lied about the contract, and then they stopped the people of Northern Ireland getting the much needed vaccines. Now, in the end, they had to back down because they were caught lying. They had to back down because they were caught with their double standards. But not a good day for the EU.
No.
I mean, and by the way, the great thing about this is Britain is 10 times more effective at administering the vaccine than the rest of the European Union. The whole thing was Britain was going to suffer out on its own when it went Britain first. You know, it didn't. It freed itself up from the bureaucracy and the lies and the politics. The vaccine nationalism that exists in the European Union at the minute is unbelievable, because it's the Italian government has already fallen because of it. The Spanish government is in trouble. There's riots in Holland because of the slow rollout of the vaccine. So that is the news of the virus.
That is the news of the virus. I'm going to ask Magda there just to open that door, because I think there's a cat that may want to come in, because this is the only way they can get through to the restroom, their restroom. But Phelim, in the next story that I want to look at, just leave the door open a wee bit there, Magda, because I think that was possibly what's going on there. There was a cat trying to get in. Here he comes. There he is. That's Mr. Scaredy Cat.
That's top.
Or it might be just, oh no, it's the top.
Both.
Oh, both. They're just looking for company. So,
Yes.
Phelim, this is an incredible story here that you came up with over the last couple of days.
Yes.
So, you know the way Republicans are really good at making speeches. Oh, is the door closed? The door for the restroom is closed. Phelim, Magda's going to have to...
appearance.
Magda's going to make a rare appearance.
Go on YouTube now and you'll see Magda.
Magda, yeah, now you see that?
Oh, wow.
Aren't they very good, you see? Is the two of them wanting to go to the
No,
restroom?
well.
Just the one. There was Magda, flying past there. Yeah,
Yes.
all very good, you see.
Yes.
In a very socially distanced way, though. Did you notice that, though? We're very careful with those kind of things around here. But you know the way Republicans are very good at making speeches, very, very good at writing white papers, not so good maybe at the art of persuasion through art. But the left certainly are, and they leave no stone unturned. So what happened, Phil?
So Haley Bennett is, you know, she's a well-known actress, not A-list, but, you know, up there B-list. She's been co-starring in a lot of movies. She was in The Magnificent Seven. She's Terrence Malick, who's the coolest director in the world, uses her for a lot. But she's now finally starring in her own movie. It's called Swallow, and the movie cost less than $1 million. And the reason I'm talking about it is because, you know, low budget, the left never sleep. You know, they put messages in movies that have 150 million, but they put messages in movies that cost less than $1 million.
They neglect no particular avenue of getting their message out.
And by the way, you know, it's winning, as the Hollywood Reporter in this article says, it's winning awards all over the place. It's getting more media coverage than movies that cost 100 million.
What's it about, Phil?
Actually, I can't tell you, Anne, because I tried to read the article and I don't know, right? But
And you'd be of average intelligence.
I'd
wouldn't
be
you,
of
Phil?
average intelligence, but I suppose I do know what it's about in some respects. Well, here's what they say. Bennett's performance as Hunter Conrad, a housewife who injects household objects, has consistently been recognised throughout award season, right?
Sorry, did you say injects?
Ingests.
Oh, ingests. She ingests household objects.
Yes.
Sure, we've all been there.
Yeah, that's right. You
know.
Yeah. So far, so good.
It didn't do me any harm.
Yes.
That broom or whatever. Okay, go on ahead there. Let's keep going.
She's no mug.
That's very funny, Phil.
Yes.
Moving on, yeah.
Yeah,
Tell us
so-
what it's about now. She ingests household objects. Okay, fair
And
enough.
has been consistently recognised throughout award season.
Of course she has. Anyone who ingests household items should be at least recognised in some respect.
Well,
Maybe by
I
a
think
site-
she's recognised for other reasons. So
Fair enough.
the journal. This is a massive article in the Hollywood Reporter, and I'm reading here. After rewatching Swallow, I remain impressed by the fact that it uses Hunter's pica disorder. I bet you didn't know that ingesting household objects is known as a pica disorder.
Well, you know.
To shine a light on generational trauma and its connection to reproductive rights.
Oh, yeah.
Most genre movies would have doubled down on the body horror aspect, but Swallow knew just the right time to have Hunter reconcile this trauma she's avoided her entire life. And then the actress, and maybe you want to play the actress here, Anne.
Oh my God, completely, absolutely. If you watch the film in reverse, you're right. You're spot on. I'm looking at my workbook here, and it's about the unconscious, right? I really love that image of Hunter running from the house and going to the hotel. I've written here, breaking free from this pattern and saying goodbye, not to Richie, but the historical, breaking free of the enslavement and the constant pattern.
And then,
Her mother couldn't connect with her in a way that I could connect with my child because this was a child born of love. Having a child is the ultimate sacrifice, and not having the opportunity to choose or being from a family that demonizes being able to make a choice for your own life is a trauma that is not fair. It's not justified.
Okay. So that, you know, you can't make any sense of that, but except for that last bit. Like, you know, children are a burden. You know, a bit like Michelle Williams. If it wasn't for my abortions, I wouldn't be here. But then, where do you hear what this $1 million film did and who helped them?
We worked really closely with Planned Parenthood, and we're really proud to have worked with Planned Parenthood. The woman in the scene when Hunter seeks out the pills was actually from Planned Parenthood, and there were so many mixed feelings that I had in that scene. I was pregnant myself during the filming, and it was really, really powerful, potent, and moving. You know the end sequence where all the women are going about their business in this private sacred sanctum. That's the Planned Parenthood clinic, is it?
Yes.
It's a private sacred Sanctum. I love that scene. It's my favourite scene in the film. A woman came up to me and we shared this conversation that was so enlightening and so moving to me. She said, I'm from Brazil, where women are inhibited from having an abortion. People are seeking out treatment that's illegal and they're dying. I couldn't stop crying knowing that a woman can't make that choice for herself. They have to resort, whatever.
Yeah.
On and on and on.
So that's the movie called Swallow, and that is the movie.
So Planned Parenthood individuals, actual workers, are in the film, and Planned Parenthood helped. But
Yes.
we've covered this before, by the
Yes,
way, Phelim, that's very interesting. The left are very smart. They have planted in Hollywood people from Planned Parenthood who work permanently and incessantly getting the Planned Parenthood message into dialogue, into scripts, into any movie that they possibly can, and helping in any way they
I
can.
wonder could they get someone to play Deborah Nucatola as she negotiates the prices of baby parts on David Daleidon's undercover videos.
And any of you didn't see that last week, you should definitely watch.
Yeah, watch
our
last week's
interview with David Daleidon. And thank you to everyone, by the way, who gave us shout outs.
So there you are, folks. You know, the left are. I mean, what caught my attention was this is $1 million movie. This is not. This is one of the cheapest movies made in Hollywood. But
Yep,
they're
but
not
they never
resting.
give up. They never give up.
And it's, as they say, as the Hollywood Reporter says, has constantly been recognised throughout award season.
There you go. So next weekend is a very sad anniversary for everyone who is a friend of Orson Bean. And, you know, I consider ourselves still friends of Orson Bean, though he's not with us here. Orson died on the 7th of February last year. And he was our friend, he was our mentor, he was so good to us when we were doing FBI Lovebirds, when we were doing, you know, the plays that we did when we were doing Ferguson. He was so kind and so generous.
He was a mentor, he just knew so much. He'd forgotten more than most people had remembered. Orson, you know...
He's a famous actor, by the way, and maybe the first thing we should do today is just have a quick look at a couple of clips of him from back in the day.
Hi, I'm Bruno.
You look a lot like my fifth husband.
Really? How many times have you been married?
4.
What are you looking for, Mr. Beavis?
My car, my Rickenbacker.
If I'd known it was my wedding day, I would have stolen a comb.
You know, he's a huge talent.
But he was in Desperate Housewives. He was in the Equalizer. He's old enough to have been blacklisted twice. He told me. He said he was blacklisted for being a communist in the 50s, 60s, and then he was blacklisted for being a conservative in the 2000s. So, you know, that is.
But he was an artist as well as, you know,
He was.
and I think his art was incredibly important to him. And one of the things that he did, you know, in the years before he died, which, I mean, he died in a car. He was hit by a car. On Venice Boulevard on his way to see his darling wife.
Just over the road here.
Just over the road here at the Pacific Residence Theatre. He did a one-man show that actually won the LA Times Critics Award. And it's really beautiful. And you can watch it. And it's available for free online. And we'll put up the link to that. But let's have a quick look at a tiny piece of that.
What happened to preparations A through G? I think about these things. This morning, my wife says to me, put mousse in your hair. Makes you look 20 years younger. 67? When the late great comedian Henny Youngman died, the New York Times, instead of its traditional obituary, published a selection of Mr. Youngman's jokes, my favorite of which is the following. A guy needs a lawyer. He looks in the yellow pages. He finds Schwartz, 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 and Schwartz. He calls up, says, let me speak to Mr. Schwartz, please. He's out playing golf. He'll be back at 3. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He's in Chicago on business, expected to return on Thursday. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He passed away some years ago. No longer with the firm. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He says, speaking. This is not the show, this is the warm-up. Jokes. The joke is a widely reviled art form. considered to be at the bottom of the literary barrel. This is because everybody tells them, and badly. But a joke told in the correct manner, concisely, and in the present tense, can be nothing short of elegant.
We highly recommend that show. But one thing that you can do is next Saturday, the Pacific Residence Theatre that was his home theatre here in Venice, are going to do a Zoom celebration of his life. They're going to have people who knew him really well tell stories and anecdotes and share pictures and all kinds of things about him. And you can join in on that. Again, look at the show notes and you'll find the Zoom information and just click on that. It's at 4 p.m. Pacific. 4 p.m. Pacific. Next Saturday.
What date is next Saturday?
The 6th of February.
Yes.
And we'd highly recommend you to go there.
Or just go to the Pacific Residence Theatre website. You'll see the link there as well.
We had a wonderful, wonderful dinner with Mark Stein. When Mark Stein came out
That's
here,
right.
Mark and Andrew Lawton both came out and we had this beautiful dinner. There's a photograph of us with Orson and beautiful Ali, his wife. Who,
That's a great picture.
Isn't it a beautiful picture? And then, after that, I mean, we had a lovely dinner here, one of our favourite dinners we had in the house here and with Orson, and he took photographs with everyone who came. And anyway, it's a huge loss, but the biggest loss of all is the loss for his wife Ali, who we think about her in a very special way at the moment in this particular week.
It's tough.
It's very tough. Okay, moving on.
The darling left.
This is the darling left, right? So this thing of cancelling and destroying people's lives for almost nothing has become really routine now. And this particular story I thought caught my eye and made me very, very sad. So a Florida CEO was at the protest, the January 6th protest at the Capitol. He's just a guy, he's protesting, he thinks something untoward happened in the election and he went there. And he put his photograph up on Instagram and wherever else. And of course it was discovered and now they're trying to cancel him. And this is
destroy his business.
And destroy his business. His business, by the way, is called barproducts.com.
It's a beautiful business.
It's a beautiful business. I want you... So basically they're trying to destroy his business. I just went online and it's funny given the fact that I often talk, or I used to talk a lot more about alcohol on the show and I'll get back to that. But this is a really nice site for anyone who'd like to buy a present for someone, like for a cocktail mixer, or if you want to buy new glasses.
Yeah.
I'd encourage people to give their business to this lovely business called... once more again there, Phil.
Bar Products.
Bar Products. So this
barproducts.com.
And the man himself is Mark Hastings, who's had just a horrible time. I'm not going to go into the details of it all there, but the Wall Street Journal did a whole article on it.
And they're basically trying to make out that he was rioting and violent. He wasn't. He was there protesting, which is his right.
Yes.
And should be encouraged. And they're trying to destroy his business because of his beliefs.
Yeah, and he didn't do any destruction, yet BLM, who destroyed all summer, are being nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, and have streets named after them.
And this man is getting his business taken off him. So I would really ask people to go there, please, and try and buy at barproducts.com. We love it. And we have news of the artist formerly known as Hunter Biden. And this is so Hunter Biden has moved in here. He is in the LA area where there's a mixed reports. One report we've heard recently is that in fact he's around the corner from us in the Venice canals.
A stone's throw away from...
stone's throw away.
And that is metaphorical stone's throw, not a...
That's right, we're not throwing any stones. But we would love to talk to him. Or he might be up in the Hollywood Hills. But there's a nice article here in the New York Post about him. And I just think it's very...
The headline is...
And the headline is...
Hiding Hunter Biden laying low in LA, starting art career with shady dealer.
So you know that he started this... He's an artist now. As I said, he's an artist. He turns 51 next week, by the way, apparently.
I should become an artist.
And he's prepping a solo show with Soho art dealer Georges Berge, who currently represents Sylvester Stallone, the artist. Berge was once, but I love this, by the way, and apparently Sylvester Stallone is a legitimate artist, and and we love him. I think my mother was such a fan of Sylvester Stallone. But anyway, Berge, though, the art dealer, was once arrested for terrorist threats and assault with a deadly weapon in California, and a strong ties to China. Do you know the way you do? Mm-hmm. Sure, we're all in there, right? Biden continues to hold business interests in a $1 billion Chinese investment firm, moved into a 2,000 square foot hilltop Los Angeles home with his wife, Melissa Cohen, 2 months before the birth of their baby boy. Their baby boy is called? Bo, after his brother. The home is connected to Sean Cohen.
No, Shane.
Shane Cohen.
K-H-O-H.
A Los Angeles-based...
Oh, can I just say something? I was
You can.
I was spelling my name yesterday for someone. And they said, how do you spell your name? And I said, P-H, and they went P, and then they went H-A-I-T-C-H.
What now?
They said, I saw them writing, they went, it says, how do you spell your name? I said, P-H, spelling it.
Yeah.
And they went P, and then they went H-A-I-T-C-H. You're not getting that. That's how they heard the word, saying the word hitch.
Oh, hitch.
By the way, apparently you can tell if someone's a Protestant or Catholic in Northern Ireland by the way they pronounce their H's.
100%. So back to Hunter Biden, the artist.
We have some Northern Ireland listeners I know, so if they would like to chime in on that, and Anne I can see is sceptical. But
rather. The home is connected to Shane Cohen,
K-H-O-H.
a Los Angeles-based entrepreneur and real estate investor who is the CEO of SXU Investment Holdings LLC.
By the way, this is an article from the
New York Post.
Yeah.
Yes, the California company that has owned the 3.8 million property since 2011, according to public records. Cohen, an American who is fluent in Chinese, sits on the board of Xinhang Realty, a Singapore-based real estate holding company, according to his LinkedIn profile. He's also listed as a venture partner of Diverse Communities Impact Fund, a private equity group that features former Democratic New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson.
Let me get this straight then. So Hunter Biden, who has all these dodgy connections to China.
Correct.
And connections then with his father to China. The big guy for 10%. Is now staying in a hilltop Hollywood Hills home with a guy who has lots of connections to China. The house is owned by.
You are correct, and the monthly rent for this little pad is $12,000 a month. Do you know the way that you'd be buying, you'd be renting a place? All of our listeners are living in places that are $12,000 a month.
Yeah,
which features a pool house that Biden has turned into an art studio. Coe denied any prior relationship with Biden to this newspaper, but anyway, basically they've, the Post are fantastic. I mean, obviously the Post are the ones that had the original story that was suppressed.
What really struck me about this story was that the person who has decided that George Berger, who decided that Hunter Biden is so worth giving over his valuable real estate in his art gallery to put up his art.
Correct.
Also has dodgy connections to China.
Mm-hmm.
So,
as we said, we were telling someone about Hunter Biden's art interest, and someone said
art is the greatest way to launder money. So so Hunter, by the way, is driving around Los Angeles in a Porsche,
and we're going to show a photograph of this because I don't know what it looks like. It's called a Porsche Panamera. So you're looking at it now on your screen, a Porsche Panamera. 90,000, lovely.
And he retains control of a corporation that has a 10% stake in BHR Partners, a Chinese private equity firm with $2 billion in assets and partly owned by the Bank of China.
Nothing to see here, Philip. Nothing to see here, Philip.
But he's got
his paintings. Can I do this? The paintings feature pastel bursts of flowers and other shapes made with layers of alcohol ink that he blows with a metallic straw onto Japanese yoppo paper, a smooth synthetic material made from recycled paper. We're so happy, by the way, that the paper is recycled.
Actually, I like this. This guy here, Anderson, who's that? He sums it up. We highly doubt, however, a career as an artist will do anything more than act as a vehicle to further shield where income is coming from.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll be obviously keeping up with the Bidens and with more information there. And don't forget,
I'd love to buy one of his pieces of art.
No, you're not doing that. And you can keep in touch with us and you can help support us by going to the unreportedstoriesociety.com and giving what you can. And don't forget, it's a tax deductible.
And finally,
finally we have, I'm really excited about this. Finally we have a game-changing recipe.
No, we
don't. Do you like that?
No, we don't.
I said, and finally.
No, finally we have an apology. Which comes in the format of a game-changing recipe.
Which comes in the form clever play on words. Katie MacDonald wrote last week, what? No recipe? And I wrote back, apologies. Katie promised to have one next week. And here we are. This is a game changer. I think you're going to love this forever. This is like the best thing. I just can't believe how nice this is. This is called sheet pan mac and cheese, elevated with bacon and caramelized onions and sun-dried tomatoes. It's the pasta. All of that in there, and then we're going to do this naughty thing. We're going to do this which no one's ever seen before. Oh my God. So here's what you're going to start and do, and you're going to start seeing the photographs here. Basically, you want to get your sheet pan. I put down some tin foil on that, and then butter that. Butter it generously, because the butter itself is going to be yummy, 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 yummy. Right? There's an enormous amount of cheese in this, 24 ounces of cheese. I would use half of that cheese would be, and by the way, we'll put the recipe up. It'll be there up in our website. I would have 12 ounces of the cheese, extra sharp cheddar, and then the other half could be anything, by the way. It can be another cheddar, could be Parmesan, and I used some Parmesan, and I used some jalapeno Munster that I saw in Gelson's. 6 slices of great bacon, so get some bacon. I did this before, so you're not going to see that. I cooked bacon, I took away all the fat, and I chopped up the meat. I also thinly sliced an onion, and by the way, a mandolin is great for that, and then I fried that up, basically caramelized that in the bacon fat. Sun-dried tomatoes chopped very thinly, and then whatever. So here's what you do. Heat the oven, by the way, really, really hot to 475. Cook the pasta, and you'll see what I do with the pasta, which is a bit of a cheat, but I love it. I always cook pasta in the microwave, and I think it's a great way to save time and to know that you've got the timing right. So cook your pasta with whatever it says in the packet, but cook it. I would do it in the microwave, but you can do it on the stovetop if that's what you really want to do. And then you see us outside here, and I was outside here putting this together. What you then do is put your drained pasta, add all your cheeses, add your bacon, add the sun-dried tomatoes, and what else do we put in? A little bit of cayenne, just an eighth of a spoon of cayenne, and all of that. Put all that together and give it a good old mix. Then spread it nice and thinly on your already buttered sheet pan, right? Pour that, and they do that. Then pour the milk over the surface, and the milk is 2/3 of a cup. 2/3 of a cup. Just sprinkle that all over the place.
You pour the milk over the top.
And you pour the milk over the top of that.
that.
Oh, you're going to need some nice moisture there, and then keep some of the cheese back, and then sprinkle that cheese on the top, and you're going to put that uncovered into the oven for 15 minutes.
And they preheat the oven to 475.
I had mentioned that. And so, by the way, it comes out of the oven. Look at what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. Yum, 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 yum. And actually, you know what? Because I think the problem is, if you think of a regular mac and cheese, there's those crispy bits at the top that are like 90, so you have 90% creamy bit on the bottom and 10% of that crispy bit. This thing changes those ratios a lot. You have a huge amount of the crispy bits at the top. It's really, really yummy. And we served it with a beautiful green salad, a really nice, healthy green salad, which reminds me of my friend Anne-Marie, who used to smoke, and she would eat an apple when she was smoking, and that was kind of like to try and make her think that she was doing something healthy. So I don't know if the mac and cheese is that healthy, but you know what? It'd be a great thing to bring if you were going to a Super Bowl party, obviously socially distanced and all of that, but it'd be a great thing to do, and it's just, once you've constructed it, then it just goes into that really hot oven for 15 minutes. How much did you like it, Phelim?
It was delicious.
And I would serve that with a glass of cab. As you see, I had a couple of glasses of cab. Or actually, do you know what? I had one glass of cab, but I sipped it a lot during the process. Because you know the way it's very stressful, that cooking and all that. Anyway, enough of all of this. We've had quite the big week. And
actually, did we talk about Scaredy Cat?
Yeah, we left for the airport, and just before we left and got into the taxi, Scaredy Cat got out. But you know what was great? Because he's Scaredy Cat, and our friend Ali, who is an expert on cats, said he'll never go far, he just hung out in the backyard smoking cigarettes, drinking cocktails.
But wouldn't come in.
Very relaxed.
So we had someone here.
We had lots of people come over here to try and coax him in. He would not come in. That's the kind of him.
And we had a cat flap, a dog flap that a dog. What do you? I don't know what Americans call.
We have a cat flap.
I think it's a dog flap. Anyway, but he wouldn't come in through the dog flap. So eventually, what we did was we put catnip and food on the inside of the dog flap, and basically 3 hours before we arrived back, he came in, and it was like
just and behaved like nothing had happened. Yeah. And then when we got here, which was really, really late on Saturday night, I walk in, and they're on the armchair facing the front door. The two of them just chilled, just sitting there like nothing ever happened.
Yeah. And he'd been outside for over 48 hours.
Oh, for sure.
No food, or anything like that. So
yeah, but we have a feeling that the neighbours are feeding him because he's incredibly good looking. We've mentioned that before. Okay, there's a couple of photographs of the cats, by the way.
Yes.
Okay, enough of that for the week. We look forward to
seeing you. On YouTube.
Be in touch, please. Do remember to give any donation you can to unreportedstoriesociety.com. You'll see that on the screen, unreportedstoriesociety.com. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, we've got a great interview next week.
Got a great interview next week.